For my community, despite the testing centres and vaccination clinics now moving on, the immense impact of the COVID-19 pandemic is still being acutely felt. Lockdowns, the presence of the military, poor treatment by sections of the media and political class, and of course, the illness and death. While COVID pushed our health system to the breaking point, the system was already struggling to cope with before the first positive case was ever recorded. A parliamentary inquiry into health services in the South West Sydney growth region, established before the pandemic in early 2020, described things this way: more must be done and without delay to address the historical underfunding of health services in South West Sydney. Some 3 years later, the statistics from the latest available quarter are damning. South West Sydney has the largest elective surgery waiting list in the state and the second highest number of people leaving the emergency department before receiving or completing treatment. I'm proud to be part of a government that will address this crisis by adding 600 new beds across South West and Western Sydney, investing $115 million into Fairfield Hospital, and by implementing safe staffing levels. Critical investments that will take the pressure off Campbelltown and Liverpool hospitals. We will also act on one of the recommendations from that 2020 inquiry by starting the process to build a new public hospital at the Aerotropolis. Airports are once in a century piece of transformative infrastructure, and the Western Sydney Airport and Bradfield Aerotropolis provide a unique chance to fix many of the issues that affect Leppington and the Greater West. They can act as a catalyst to ensure our region finally gets its fair share. But good quality links into the airport need to be there on day one. One of those links, 15th Avenue, the major east-west arterial through Austral, is still a 2-lane council road with no curb or gutter and is in terrible condition. William Freem, a visitor to the area, described the road as absolutely the worst in the country in 1904. Sadly, not much has changed. The road is a car park each morning and afternoon peak. Thanks to the election of a Minns Labor government, 15th Avenue will finally relinquish the title Mr Freem awarded it some 119 years ago. We have committed $50 million to upgrade the road, as well as $305 million for a rapid bus service to Western Sydney Airport that will travel in part along 15th. Local high schools, TAFEs and universities also need to be in place if we are to provide effective employment and educational pathways to the airport. Future generations from Leppington must have access to the jobs of tomorrow in industries such as aeronautics, advanced manufacturing and logistics. Unfortunately, those pathways are currently out of reach. Despite booming populations in the suburbs of Austral, Leppington and Denham Court, the area does not have a single public high school. Worse still, land parcels earmarked for future public schools were sold off under the previous government. Many local public schools in my electorate are overcrowded, in desperate need of upgrade, and students regularly go whole terms without a permanent teacher. We have a skills crisis because a once proud TAFE system has been gutted. This government will build a new public high school in Leppington in its first term. We will undertake upgrades at local schools, including $4 million for Eagle Vale High School, converting it into a much-needed specialist sports school. We will also establish domestic manufacturing centres of excellence to rebuild the TAFE system and our state's domestic manufacturing capability. For too long, Leppington has been taken for granted, another neglected corner of someone else's electorate. Fringe no longer, we now have our own electorate and Member of Parliament. I intend not to waste that opportunity. Deputy Speaker, my life is marked by a series of people who saw more in me than I did in myself. Former teachers, professors, bosses, board directors, mates, colleagues and family. Thank you for the chats, words of encouragement, and for occasionally pulling me aside, telling me to pull my head in and not to waste my potential. Especially you, Mum and Dad. In contrast to my education, Mum and Dad both dropped out of school early. Mum in Year 9 and Dad in Year 8 to become what he liked to tell people was a floor covering installation mechanic, a carpet layer. Dad would later leave the world of floor covering installation in his late 20s to become a New South Wales police officer and go on to serve the force for close to 30 years. On reflection, Dad's desire to serve the people of New South Wales had an early impact on me, as did his love for the mighty South Sydney Rabbitohs.
No accounting for taste.
While Dad and I support the Bunnies, Mum and my brother John are St George fans. Attendance at the Charity Shield was, for a long time, an annual family tradition, going back to when the games were played at the hollowed grounds of Redfern Oval. And given what's happening tonight, go the Blues. Mum, aptly named Gail, is fiercely opinionated and prone to sudden outbursts of frank, passionate and occasionally constructive feedback. She is also the kindest, most loving and generous person I've ever known. Despite not having much when we were growing up, she was always the first to lend a hand to a neighbour, friend or family member doing it tougher than we were. While I know Mum's passion has certainly rubbed off on me, I also hope some of that selflessness and altruism has too. While they aren't able to make it tonight due to Dad's dementia, I know they are immensely proud of their boy, often embarrassingly so. Now a father of 2 amazing children, I get it, sort of. At the heart of it was a want for their son to do better than they had, and I'm glad that through their hard work and sacrifice, they got to see me make history as the first ever member for Leppington. Deputy Speaker, a person is of course as much a product of their environment as they are their genetics. In the mid-80s, our family moved to the Bonnyrigg Public Housing Estate. I attended Tarlington and Bonnyrigg Primary Schools and then Bonnyrigg High School. My core group of friends from my teens are still my mates to this day, several of them helping out on the campaign. Thank you, Team Bono, 2177 represent.
Can't get that out of you.
A gang sign's unparliamentary behaviour. I haven't checked. Yes. Thankfully, they have little interest in politics and keep me grounded by providing a welcome respite from the circus. One of those friends is my now wife, Christy. As she likes to remind people, primarily because of how cheesy I find it, yes, we are high school sweethearts. Our friendship started because she was into R&B and I was a hip-hop head. We would swap magazines and albums and share our opinions on what we liked and what we were listening to. I was a Nas and Wu-Tang kind of guy. She was more of a Mary J. Blige and Boyz II Men type. My parents were born here and are primarily from Anglo-Celtic backgrounds. Her parents came here as refugees from Vietnam in the late 1970s. I'm loud and opinionated. She's more measured in her feedback. Usually the look will do it. There's also a noticeable height difference, and I'm right-handed while she's a lefty. That said, we have the important things in common, our values and our love of food. We've made it work for 26 years, 18 of those in marriage. Along the way, we've had 2 beautiful children, Nia and Evan. Very good. Thankfully, they've inherited the best of both of us. They're smart, mature, and have their heads screwed on straight. No trips to the Deputy Principal's office as yet.